Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. If one thing can be relied upon, it is that the SNP will continue to harm children. They have this obsession with them when they're not trying to sexualise them or actually physically abuse them in some cases. And I've got names that I'm not going to say. We have evidence, of course, that they continually want to do permanent damage to them, both physical and psychological. This is attested by the fact that whilst in England, puberty blocking medications have been made illegal outside of very, very specific conditions. In the wake of the Tavistock debacle, I suppose would be the word, where an independent inquiry showed that 97.5% of all cases referred and where action was taken were unnecessary. They were not gender dysphoria. They were in sometimes grief, PTSD, depression, all sorts of other conditions. And yet 97.5% of them went through with that without any kind of control. It was appalling. Permanent, long-lasting physical and psychological damage. It was banned in England, but Scotland, just to be different, is allowing it because they think that their children can handle being destroyed. Let's have a look at this and see how evil the SNP are. Here goes. So, of course, the idea of the SNP pushing this doesn't surprise me. The idea for them, all these little boys that we can feminise and keep rather childlike and girl-like, while they still maintain, obviously, their ghoulies, their penises and things. It's just more grist to the mill for these pervs, isn't it? Because we all know what the P stands for in SNP. But this, of course, damages children. Most of these children given these things are not necessary. They're not gender dysphoric. They are, otherwise engaged with other problems. But it's far easier to dish out these things and destroy lives than it is to actually get to the heart of the matter and find out what is wrong with them. And, of course, there's also the fact that you get transgenderism by proxy, trans housing it's called. And this is where parents think, oh, my son's not gay, he must want to be a woman, because it's easier for them to have a little boy pretending to be a little girl than it is to accept that their child is gay. Terrible, isn't it? But puberty blocker prescription for kids will continue in an absolutely shocking move. Because, of course, it's the SNP. They don't care about your children. Like I say, it's just more access for them. There are people very closely associated with the SNP, senior to the SNP, very closely associated with the Celtic Boys Club, for example. Naming no names. I know them, and one day I will be able to talk about them, but just not yet. The decision comes despite calls for NHS Scotland to follow the same path as NHS England and put a stop to the prescription of these controversial medications outside of clinical testing because they are permanently damaging children. There is no way back. You are sterilising on a mass scale. Now let me think. Who else sterilised children on a mass scale? Oh yes, 1930s, Germany, in the camps. There's no difference, is there? The practice of prescribing puberty blockers to children will continue in Scotland, despite a major change in practice in other parts of the UK who actually care about children. The controversial practice was stopped in NHS England following a review that raised questions over claims the impact is reversible, when it's clearly not. The claims made that it's reversible are the ones made by the Tavistock Clinic, which is so bad it's being closed down and there are thousands of people putting a class action in. It's going to destroy it. You could be looking at £1 billion fines, in punishment fines and compensation against the NHS in England. £1 billion. Because this reversible quote is not true. Despite calls for campaigners and opposition MPs to review the treatment of trans-identified kids, a report has determined that there are a rising number of adults and children who are seeking support. The support being that they've been put on these things, they've grown up through these things, they've had all sorts of things done to them at the behest either of parents or doctors rushing them into it without explaining fully or telling people that it's not reversible. Children 8, 9, 10 years of age sterilised because apparently, according to the SNP, they are mature enough to decide at 9 years of age that they want to be sterilised for the remainder of their lives. This is the same SNP that says 25-year-olds can absolutely do these things to children and not face a day in jail because 25-year-olds aren't mature enough. Of course, we know why, with the Muslim in chief wanting, access to children, I think. Lots of little boyish girls and girlish boys, all for his little, pleasure dome, shall we say. This is obviously... by the time I'm recording this, I've already recorded the other thing. What we will not call him... I'm not going to address him by his name anymore. I'm just going to call him the treasonous shit. We all know who the treasonous shit is. I'm never referring to that man by his name again, unless accidentally, in which case do apologise. But hopefully the treasonous shit will be gone before too long. Anyway, the report was published via Healthcare Improvement Scotland, part of NHS Scotland, and it was commissioned by the Scottish Government to consult the public and other interested parties on standardising services provided by gender identification clinics. The outcome sparked backlash from Megan Gallagher, the deputy leader of the Scottish Conservatives, who said the SNP need to urgently be upfront about their justifications for continuing puberty-blocking services in Scotland when the risks of using such treatments are not well known and have been restricted elsewhere in the UK. Because it's permanent, but then, the SNP are quite happy to sexualise children. And I suppose the other thing is, if they can sterilise these children, then there'll be no way that they can get them pregnant, kind of thing. So, they're safe. There'll be no worries in years to come. We'll just have all these children, because they are all peas, aren't they? Especially the Chapman creature. She's up there. She wants to push all this, doesn't she? Destroy a whole generation of children. Mass, industrial scale sterilisations. How evil can a party be and still not be chased out of town and still not be treated in exactly the same way as the National Socialists were? We need a set of new Nuremberg trials, and we need to put every one of these people up there, especially the treasonous turd. He needs to stand first. They're backing this, they're pushing this, they're destroying children, and they're doing it on purpose. They know, and yet they're still pushing it. Why? What is their obsession with children all the time? The consultation document said those young people embarking down the route of hormone therapy should receive accurate information, of which there isn't any, including the benefits and risks, alongside monitoring and review by medical specialists. HIS has also said there's no standardised care for the more than 3,700 young gender patients. Now, gender dysphoria affects about 1 in a million, which means in the whole of Scotland there should be 5 people with gender dysphoria, and that's boys, girls, old, young, and they've got 3,700 young people. That means it isn't gender dysphoria. It's ideological damage. It is fascism. It is pushing this onto children to destroy an entire generation. And you guarantee most of them are white, which is what, of course, the treasonous turd wants for his great race replacement, only bringing in all the new Scots. Patients head to the Sandyford Clinic in Glasgow, which can refer children to specialist paediatric endocrinologists for total sterilisation on an industrial scale. The risks associated with these include loss of fertility, sterilisation, of sexual function. Well, not for the men who'll be using the children. They'll be fine, just the kids won't enjoy it. And in England, a key review by Dr. Hilary Cass, God bless your mum, found that they're not a safe or viable long-term option. And they're not, because they do not address the initial problem, which is not this. It's not the body. The problem is in here. And until you address in here, whatever you do out here makes no difference. And that is why they banned it in England. And yet they still want to push this in Scotland, because in Scotland, this regime, this dangerous fascist regime, want mass sterilisations, and they want to sexualise these children. Let's have lots of little girlish boys for them to pick. All these delectable little children, they think, for their own amusement. They're disgusting pieces of degenerate filth, and they're coming after your children. I'm coming up. I think there's no bottom to the depravity of the SNP, the harm they do at every level of society. But to go after innocent children continually, time and time again, is just... it's sick. These people There's something inside them. There's something cancerous in their minds. They want to constantly harm them. They destroy their education. They destroy their future hopes. And now they're destroying their very sexuality and their bodies. And that's when they're not busy lusting over them. They are one sick organisation. It needs to be declared an illegal organisation. And the shit in charge of it needs to be deported back to whatever rock he crawled out of from under. And live with all the other maggots and insects that are the likes of what he is. I'm just going to stop because it's not how I wanted to end. This has been the last video of the day, I think, but it's not how I wanted to end. But it is just how it is, isn't it? It's just getting worse. I'll stop there anyway. Thank you very, very much for watching today. You've all been very kind. It's been a very big selection. I have got angry a few times, and I apologise for that. But hopefully we'll begin tomorrow slightly brighter and with more better news, hopefully, about the end of the cancerous turd that leads the SNP. Till then, I go forth with hope in my heart. I hope you have a good evening. I intend to. Thank you and goodbye.